Okay, I'm a little shook right now. I'm not sure how I'm going to get into this video and describe just how shooketh I am. Where do I start? This morning started with me watching the new episode of X-Men 97. I've been covering it on this channel. And as you know, I thought that the first three episodes were really, really good. I thought that the fourth episode was incredibly weak. I reviewed that. The fourth episode made me question, is this going to be another Disney Plus show that starts off really good and then falls off the deep end? But as you know, even with what I was enjoying, I really did not like what they were doing with Rogue and Magneto. Boy, will we talk about that in a second. So then we get to episode 5, and it's with episode 5, it's like episode 4 never happened. It's like I don't even know why they created such a weak episode that was just so different and so tonally different. We get into episode 5, and this show is shocking me and surprising me in ways that I never imagined we would ever get to. And I am shocked that this is on Disney Plus for more reasons than one. Am I saying that the episode is good? I would say, as an episode, objectively written, it is a great episode, a fantastic episode. However, there are some caveats I have with it. But this episode is great in a way that is incredibly shocking to me. Like, I can't believe that they went in these areas, but I understand, and there's just a depth to the storytelling that they're getting at. But let's get into it. This episode is called Remember It. Boy, is it called Remember It. And it goes back to the original one story formula. And while this show has been very, very criticized for having pacing issues, this one has so much in it, and it's the longest episodes of the series. But I never once felt like the storytelling was going along too fast, or that I was having a hard time keeping up, or that emotional moments weren't given enough time. So it starts off with Magneto and Rogue are going to Genosha for a conference because they're going to join the UN. So many mutants are on this island, and Gambit is trailing along to keep an eye on them because he's suspicious about what's going on. And they run into Nightcrawler as Magneto is going for a meeting, and Nightcrawler has a conversation with Gambit about him and Rogue's relationship that I really liked that conversation. And what that happened in this scene, and by the way, Nightcrawler is back, and they do touch on his Catholicism a bit, which, everybody thought that that was going to be eliminated from the show, but they do touch on it a bit. And Nightcrawler asks Gambit, why don't you just marry Rogue? And Gambit essentially says that he has too much sin in his life in order to ever get a happy ending like that. And Nightcrawler says that there can't be love without sin. And that's the theme of the episode, because the episode gets in the other half is getting into the X-Men's dirty laundry and the characters making mistakes and the things that they have done in the past. The first facet of that is when we get back to the mansion. We have Cyclops and Jean Grey falling apart because Jean Grey doesn't know who she is. She doesn't really understand the memories she has. The memories make her kiss Wolverine at one point, which he brushes off, which I was very glad that he brushes Jean off for that. That made him look stronger, the fact that he would put her away like that. But you have Scott, who is completely losing it himself because he had to give up his son because he found out that his wife was fake. Understandably, there's a lot of trauma there. Now, here is where I would say that the show, this is definitely not a kid's show. That isn't even a pretense of, maybe you should watch the show first with your kids. And no, I would, if I was recommending this to a parent, I would say don't watch this show with your kids. There's way too much in terms of affairs, implications, a lot of blood at the end, like anime level styles of it. And what it is it's very, very accurate to the comics. It's like this show has thrown off all pretense of being based in the 90s comics anymore, or being based in the original show. You might as well have, once again, you might as well have just made it a completely new show. It is just straight up trying to adapt comic book storylines and trying to be like the comics. And in some cases of that, I would say that, I would say you guys shouldn't have gone here. And in other ways, I'm glad that they've gone in certain places. The Scott stuff and Jean stuff, I was a little questioning, because I'm like, would Scott get this upset? Would he lose control this much over what is going on in his life? And I'm fine with it as an adaptation in this show. Is it something that would have happened in the original show? No, but I'm fine with it in this adaptation. And once again, you're going back to Nightcrawler's words in the beginning about there can't be love without sin, and these characters who are just breaking apart and doing things that they normally wouldn't, and you can just see them pulling apart the seams. You see Scott lose it on TV about all of his frustrations with being a mutant. But meanwhile, you get back to Genosha, and it's a place that looks too good to be true, and it looks like it's going to be this big unifying thing. I don't know why Sebastian Shaw was there, because he's such a bad character. I don't know why he was showing up. I can understand Emma Frost, because she goes on redemption. But now, the showrunner, this show was so shocking for what it did next, that the showrunner, Bo DeMeo, who was fired, actually came out and went back to social media, but he said that this episode was supposed to be like 9/11, so they were portraying 90s episodes that was like showing an overall more lighthearted aspect of the X-Men, and then this episode is like 9/11, where something really bad happens and then we get into a darker storyline. And what happens is what is a comic storyline from the 2000s, so we're out of the 90s, we're into the 2000s, called E for Extinction, when so many mutants are killed and it really breaks everything apart. And it is so shocking when that happens, and so intense. I was really, really gripped by it all. Before we get into that, we have the Magneto Rogue stuff that's coming to a head. And I got flack. This is the one part of the episode that I hate. I got so much flack on here for calling out Magneto and Rogue and saying that it was creepy and saying that it's never worked. And the show finally goes into the backstory, and it somehow makes the backstory worse than the comics, because in the comics it was nothing more than a flirtation in the Savage Land, a flirtation and nothing more, for like 3 panels that they kept referencing over the years. Nothing actually happened between them. And even though I thought it's so creepy that he is 40 to 60 years older than her. Yes, it is true she was legally an adult when that happened in the comics. In this show, they're like, oh, Mystique took her to him to learn about her powers, and then they found that they could touch, and they had this affair. And it's like, first of all, never happened in the comics. Second of all, I'm pretty sure in canon, Rogue was supposed to be a teenager when that happened, when she was with Mystique and she first ran away. So, like, everyone was, getting on Rogue for, like, having this affair. I'm sympathetic to her. I'm like, you were groomed by this man. What are you talking about? Like, but I hated that they did that, because not only does that makes Magneto just such a hateable character to me, and it's gross on the level I'm like, you should not have gone here. You're not even adapting. You're even going further than the comics did. And I'm like, Mystique, for all the evil things she has done, is very, very overprotective of Rogue, and I do not believe for a second that she would have ever allowed this to happen. And I would have just thrown this show out if they hadn't wrapped it up at the end, because she has a conversation with Gambit about it finally, and for a while in this very gross scene, she's dancing with Magneto, making it seem like she is going to accept his offer to be his queen in Genosha, which that did kind of happen in the comics. Magneto proposed and she turned him down flat years and years and years later. Once again, this is something that happened in the 2000s. We are out of the 90s now. And like that happened in the comics, she turns Magneto down, and saying that some things are more than skin deep, just echoing Gambit's sentiment. So, but the way they handled it, and it's kind of like, why did you make Rogue go on this really, this dance with Magneto where they're holding hands and touching in front of Gambit if she's going to ultimately choose him? Like, you're just doing that for the drama so that he'll leave, so that he'll think that she didn't choose him. But what that sets up is we got Cable running in there, and I'm very excited for the Cable stuff and how that's wrapping up in here. And he warns that this is coming, that this big nuclear level event is happening. And what you see next is Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit have to fight for their lives, as there's this new Sentinel that if anybody who goes against this Sentinel dies, and that's just what happens. And it's this really heart-wrenching sequence where you just see so many characters get slaughtered or close to slaughtered, and Magneto dies, and I was so happy. I was like, yes, he's dead. And Rogue tries to avenge him, but Gambit would never let Rogue do that. He would never let her kill herself, so he blows her to the side with his powers, because his powers don't work on her. And then he is the one who ends up sacrificing himself to destroy the Sentinel and blowing it up. And that's why the episode is called Remember It, because he uses his famous line. And I really loved that. I loved that development on Gambit, because this is a guy who thinks that he's lost everything. He doesn't think that he's a hero. He thinks that Rogue has chosen someone else over him, and he is still willing to sacrifice himself for her, and he is still willing to sacrifice himself for the entire island and all who is left, knowing that he will die after all the characters have put him down, and he puts himself down all the time. That was great. That scene at the end with Rogue and Gambit was great. And maybe the reason, like, everyone's talking about this, some people seem to think that Gambit and Magneto are dead. As much as I would like Magneto to be dead and never come back, because now apparently he's a child groomer, they're both gonna come back. Like, X-Men's very famous for its resurrections. The Phoenix has the power to resurrect characters. You know they're gonna come back. But it just leaves me at a loss of, like, how is Gambit gonna come back? What is this gonna lead to? This is, like, the lowest point. And it is a very, very adult show. And it's interesting, like, how it ties back into the beginning, once again, with Nightcrawler's theme that he sort of preached about, Gambit says that there's too much sin in him, but then he does something at the end completely self-sacrificing. There's sort of a lot of spiritual themes in this as well, with the characters doing these bad things, making mistakes, and, needing to forgive other characters. And then, Gambit, after he's just kind of had his heartstrings played on this entire time, sacrifices himself for Rogue and the rest of the island. So, I'm really liking where this is going. I wish that the Magneto Rogue stuff didn't happen. The comics didn't even go there. They did not need to go there at all. And I think that really needs to be called out, especially, child groomer Magneto. You don't have all the people out there who are like, well, Rogue's of age. Well, tough on you. I called it out, and apparently, unless the writers forgot something, she wasn't. That was such a cop-out. Oh, we just pretended like it never happened. Sure, it never happened in the original show. We know that. And that needs to be called out, because I feel like, as most people are praising this episode, we should not overlook that they did that. They need to get rid of that Magneto-Rogue relationship altogether for good now. They shouldn't have brought it up in the first place, and I am rather surprised. I mean, this show, I would say I'm surprised by it, but this show is clearly, it's probably the most adult thing I've seen on Disney Plus, honestly. And so while I'm really enjoying it, that is a little bit unfortunate. We are getting into, like, this is going from the 90s to the 2000s comics. And the 2000s comics were when not as many people were reading comics, and they did get much significantly darker. Next episode is going to be Life Death, wrapping up the Storm stuff. So, this show has really shocked and surprised me so far in a good way. Yes, there are things that I wish were left behind, but, after, like, the entirely meh episode of the last one that we got with Jubilee, like, this one is, like, I would say that if it weren't for that Magneto stuff, this would be the best episode in the entire series. I can't wait to see what they're doing next. This is, once again, without the Magneto Rogue stuff, this would be the best episode in the entire series. It is a shocking show, it is an exciting show, and it is definitely, by far and away, the best thing on Disney Plus. But Magneto has made a child groomer, and we should get rid of that. So that's all I got for you guys today. Did you watch the episode? Tell me what you think about in the comments below. As always, thank you, patrons, for supporting this channel. My short film is going to be finished editing and released shortly on here. I'll have more updates for that very soon, and I will see you guys next time.